Here comes the share. Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction to really what I want to look at. And as you can see, we're in the book of Numbers, and we're beginning. So they arrive at the wilderness of Zin on the first moon, and they are at Kadesh. And at that point, we're told that Miriam died and was buried. So what's striking here is that it doesn't say anything about Miriam being mourned, which is odd to say the least, because when later on, as Moses is mourned, we get to see that. We see the people are actually, and we'll see that before too long, because we're going to see the end of the book, of the end of the Torah shortly. Aaron dies, they mourn 30 days. Miriam, we don't have any mention of that, but immediately afterwards, we're told that the community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. And as you may know, there is this midrash about the fact that a well of water followed Miriam throughout her life, known as Miriam's well. And when she died, the well disappeared. And that is the connection between verse 1 and verse 2. At any rate, once again, they are without water. And once again, they are quarreling with Moses. If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of Adonai. We don't have a specific reference to when it was and who died, but they say it's enough. Why have you brought Adonai's congregation into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die there? So notice that they are blaming Moses, but they're not blaming God. They identify as God's people and say it's Moses' fault that they were brought here for them and their beasts, the cattle, the sheep, to die. Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There is not even water to drink. So here they are remembering Egypt fondly as a place where there was grain, figs, vines, and pomegranates, even though, of course, their sons were being murdered and they were being bitterly oppressed. And beyond that, there's no water. And this is not the first time. In fact, when the people left Egypt, immediately after leaving, they were complaining about water. So Moses and Aaron come away and they fall on their faces, essentially prostrating themselves so that God will appear, and God does appear. And now God says to Moses, you and Aaron take the rod. This is the rod that was used for the miracles back in Egypt. Assemble the community, and before their very eyes, order the rock to yield its water. Thus you will produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts. Now notice that God is not angry with the people, despite the fact that they were complaining. And perhaps this has to do with the fact that they view Moses as responsible. And so it's not that it's not that they're challenging God. In fact, they're not blaming God at all. They're just blaming Moses and Aaron. And so God is going to respond, and in a way that will show that Moses and Aaron are good leaders and they can do this. So again, the order is to go before them and order the rock to yield its water. That way you'll produce water for them and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts, exactly what they asked for. Moses takes the rod from before Adonai as he had been commanded. He's doing exactly at this point what he was told to do. The rod must be there at the tent of meeting. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he says, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water from you out of this rock?" And he raises his hand and he strikes the rock twice. Out comes copious water, and the community and their beasts drink. But Adonai said to Moses, "Because you didn't trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, you should not lead this congregation into the land that I have given you." I just want to check one thing because I didn't notice it before, and I want to make sure what the Hebrew is here. So bear with me for a second. Okay. Yes. Okay. It says exactly that, because you did not trust me to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israel people, you will not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, meaning that the Israelites quarreled with God, whose sanctity was affirmed through them. Okay, so this is a mysterious passage. It's not clear exactly what Moses does wrong here, and it leads to a real consequence, as Moses will not continue to lead the people into the promised land, something which must be a great disappointment to Moses. And indeed, we're going to see that he will plead to live and to take the people into the land, but he'll die just on the edge of it. So what did they do wrong? Well, a variety of suggestions in the commentators. The first is that they don't follow God's explicit instructions. God tells them to speak to the water, to the rock rather, not to strike the rock. And in Moses' defense, we had a prior incident where the people were complaining about water, and he was told to strike a rock. But here he didn't quite pay attention to what he was being asked to do. And he is required to do exactly what God tells him to do. Hence, he is not able to lead the people. And here he makes it look like he is responsible for bringing the water out of the rock. And in fact, if you look at what he says, "Listen, you rebels, shall we," that is to say, not God, but we get water for you out of this rock. It is perhaps understandable, since they were the ones who were challenging Moses and not God. He's saying, no, no, look, we will get it. But he calls them rebels. He doesn't say that God will do it, which would be to sanctify God. And then he strikes the rock not once, but twice. Maimonides in particular sees this as a sign of anger, and Moses' inability to lead once he calls the people names and also reacts with anger towards them. In fact, you could argue that the rock becomes symbolic of the people itself, and that he is expressing his anger towards the people. This is certainly a low point as we think of Moses as a leader of the people of Israel. He seems worn down, fed up, even though God has given him people to help assume the burden. Um, and I would also go back and take note of the fact that uh, Miriam has just died. Miriam was, Moses's older sister. She was the one who cared for him when he was a child. Um, it is a deep and personal relationship, and he must
And of course, he forgot. Idiot.
be utterly bereft of her loss. And this coming on top of that, he seems to lose it. Okay, let me stop share. Okay, comments or thoughts about this?
Yes.
Let's all, and then Sandy, and then Barry.
All the commentaries or everything I've heard say that because he struck the rock, Moshe was forbidden to go into the promised land. But you say this doesn't say specifically what he did. Okay.
Meaning, I'm not quite sure. What do you mean it doesn't say specifically what he did?
The fact that he struck the rock
Right.
was
Right.
not necessarily the reason, but a lot of these midrashim, a lot of these commentaries say it was because he struck the rock. So
Right. But it doesn't say why striking the rock is a problem. They simply say it's because he struck the rock. And again, that's why I was suggesting a number of reasons why striking the rock was a problem. One is that he didn't do exactly what he was told. Second is, I find Maimonides' explanation the most compelling. And that is that
Yeah, of
he
course.
lost it. He became so angry with the people
Asshole.
that the relationship between Moses and the people had broken down to the extent that he really wouldn't be able to lead.
Asshole.
God says specifically is that Moses had an opportunity to sanctify God and to go. One can see this as he made it about himself, made it about himself and Aaron. Can we bring forth water from this rock? Rather than behold as God brings forth water from this rock. Understandable, perhaps, given the loss of his sister, given the fact that he and not God was personally under attack. Nonetheless, he missed an opportunity to sanctify God. Sandy, I think you were next.
Right. Well, I think it's really not fair of God. I think God should be, if I could say this, faulted because God, it was a setup. Like you said, before that, he used the rod. And here he is. Why would God ask him to hold the rod if he's not going to use it? I mean, it's a temptation. Don't give somebody something that, like that. It was a temptation, and Moses fell for it, if you like. But God should have just said, go talk to the rock.
Yeah, I think that is perhaps another problem that by using the rod and by actually pounding with it, it almost looks magical, right? And perhaps that's something of a problem. But as you said, he had done it before. Um, there are some modern commentators who suggest simply that Moses was the wrong person to lead the Israelites into the promised land. You needed somebody younger, somebody more of a military leader. Joshua, who is his assistant, is the appropriate person to do that. And this is also suggesting that no one is above the law, that even Moses uh, will face consequences. And the higher the official, the more grave the consequences and the more is demanded of them. I also want to say something else about this, and I think that the biblical point of view is that though Moses wants to go to the promised land, as we'll see as he's remembered at the very end, Moses will have done his job. It's not about Moses. It's not about his personal sense of satisfaction. He's referred to as Eved Adonai, God's servant. Fundamentally, and I think you could abstract from this, it says in Pirkei Avot, which I know you're fond of, do not serve the master in order to get a reward. Right? Moses here, he is fulfilling his commission. And in some sense, that should be enough. None of us gets to see our life's work really end, fulfilled when we die. There's always more. But our mission in this world has come to an end. I think, though it's sad for Moses, I think there's something very profound. The other thing from Pirkei Avot is the work is not yours to complete, but you're not free to desist from it. But there is a tragic quality to it. One can say, after all he's gone through and after all he's put up with, nonetheless, he doesn't get to finish the journey. But maybe the journey is never finished. Okay, so maybe not a great answer, but the best I can come up with. Go ahead, Barry.
I see the distinction between natural cause and divine cause. So I'll give you an analogy. Suppose God commanded Moses to go to some spot and wave the rod over that spot, and water would come gushing out. Versus God tells Moses, take this shovel and dig a well, and you'll find water. So the people would view that second scenario, the shovel, as though he happens to know that there was water there. Whereas if he just waved the rod and water gushed out, the more reasonable explanation is some divine cause. And there was also the words of sanctify God, so, by doing this act. So by just holding the rod in front of the rock, and water comes out, the explanation would have would more likely be some divine intervention. Whereas the act of striking the rock, for me, is possibly a way to free the water that's already there. There's a sense, similar to digging a well. The water is there. It just has to be loosened. He strikes it twice because that's what he needed to do to free the water from behind the rock.
Yeah, I think that's right. It sort of reminded me as you were talking about it, that the rod itself connotes a miracle, right? When God says, hold your rod over the sea and it will split, right? There's no question that's miraculous, and it's not coming from Moses and his rod, it's coming from God. Right? So the idea that the rod in itself becomes kind of a symbol of something miraculous, something that God has done, provided, as you said, that he's not using it like a shovel. he's not indicating that somehow that he is able to do this rather than God. That it's a little less miraculous. It's a little less of God's work. And I think that is certainly true. It's hard to. I'm also struck by the fact when we saw this text, I think last time, with Nadav and Avihu, and when God tells Moses to, well, God doesn't tell Moses. Moses goes up to Aaron, who's lost his sons, and he said, "This is what God meant when God said, through me, I God is sanctified by those who are close to God," right? So Moses wants to read sanctification even into that circumstance, perhaps because he's trying to comfort his brother. But here, there's no talk of sanctification, right? Just the opposite. He's saying, we'll do it, not God doing it. Were there any other hands before I come back to Sandy? Okay, Sandy.
So, getting back to at the golden calf incident, also Moses showed his anger, even though the rabbis try to say he wasn't angry. That there's all sorts of midrashims justifying what he did, or even saying that God was happy with what he did. But he showed he actually he tossed it. He didn't just drop it. And in Pirkei Avot, there's all sorts of things about anger is like killing somebody. How bad anger is. So people, even in the movie The Ten Commandments, well, no, yeah, well, they say that Moses didn't go into the Promised Land because of the golden calf was why they wandered for 40 years. But that was another incident of Moses's anger,
Yes.
throwing the Ten Commandments.
Right. But I think there's a big difference. Moses' anger at the golden calf is righteous indignation. He's angry for what they're doing, in a sense, to God. That this is idolatry, right? Whereas in this case, he's simply angry at the people, and in part, right after they challenged Moses, and Aaron, and he calls them names. Whereas at the golden calf, he's doing everything he can to defend them. Right? We don't see that here at all. There's something prophetic. You see in prophets anger against the people, but again, they're channeling God in some sense. Here, Moses, in some sense, as the one who seems to be feeling responsible. Here in the golden calf, it's much more understandable, I think. But this is not righteous indignation. This is not the people challenging God. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else? Okay, we're going to move on to another text. And let me share my screen again. Here we are. Okay. And now we come to what Hertz in his commentary calls the Great Rebellion. And this is the rebellion of Korach, who is the son of Ishar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi. So it's important to realize that he's a Levite. He's not just an Israelite. He already is a part of a tribe that will have special status and special recognition. And it says in the Hebrew is simply Vayikach Korach, he took. But here, and it's not clear, there's no direct object to he took, but this translation is, in a sense, reading in, he took himself along with, and now we get Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, and On, the son of Pelach, who are from the tribe of Ruvain, right? So we get here leader from a leadership tribe, and we also, so there are people who naturally would expect to be leaders, and they resent the fact that Moses and Aaron are the leaders, and they get together with 250 Israelites who are themselves leaders, chosen in the assembly, men of repute, people of good reputation. So this is a formidable group. These are not just Jews who are kvetching over the lack of water. And they combine against Moses and Aaron, and they say, Rav Lechem, you've gone too far, you've taken too much. And their argument is the entire community is holy. And that's, of course, what we've heard, that they are Am Kadosh, a holy people, that the whole people, in some sense, are like Kohanim, all of them, and God is in their midst. And therefore, why do you raise yourself up over the congregation? So Korach is challenging Moses' authority. Korach is saying that he is abrogated to himself the role that he has. And when Moses hears this, he falls on his face. So there's lots of midrash about Korach's challenges to Moses. The rabbis see it through a rabbinic lens. And just to give you one, he says, Korach says, if a house has 5 Torah scrolls in it, does it need a mezuzah? And Moses, because after all, the text of the mezuzah is actually written in the Torah scrolls. And Moses says, yes, it does. And Korach says it's absurd. And then there are others, some say, again, some challenging Aaron. But this is, I would say, demagoguery. as he's saying, why are you better than anyone else? So he speaks to Korach and his company, saying, and here he's very definitive. Come morning, Boker, and Adonai will make known who is holy by granting direct access. The one whom God has chosen will be granted access. So he says, God will demonstrate it. So he tells Korach and his band, these are Levites, to take fire pans and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before Adonai. And the candidate who Adonai chooses, he is the Holy One. So this is a, notice that God doesn't tell him to do this, that Moses he's not going to God and saying, oh my God, what should I do? He's acting very decisively. And the challenge he's making itself is quite striking. Because remember that Aaron's sons died by bringing strange fire. And here, unauthorized fire, they too brought their incense pans. And here Moses is saying, okay, let's see if you are really authorized, fine, burn some incense. And the one who God has chosen will be the leader. And he says, Rav Lechem b'nei Levi, you are the ones who have gone too far. And he says further to Korach, hear me, sons of Levi, is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart from the community, given you direct access to perform the duties of Adonai's tabernacle and to minister to the community and to serve them? Right? Now that God has advanced you and your fellow Levites with you, you seek the priesthood too, right? Because they're challenging Aaron. Surely it is against Adonai that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you should rail against him? So here Moses is making explicit what is implicit, and he says, "You've got a lot of nerve. You already have privileged positions. You are the ones who minister in the Mishkan and to the community, because the Levites are also the teachers of the community. And you have a role to perform. Right? And there is some sanctity associated with that role. And now you want Aaron's place? This is what God has ordained, and it is against God that you have bound together. And Moses sends for Datam and Aviran, and he says, and they say, we won't come. So they're refusing. Well, in some sense, right? They want to, they are unwilling even to listen to Moses, to let him say what he's going to say. They won't come. And here, is it not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness? You would also lord it over us, right? They refer to Egypt as a land flowing with milk and honey. Even if you brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey and given us possession of fields and vineyards, should you gouge out the eyes of those involved? He says, we won't come. And Moses is aggrieved, and he says to God, pay no regard to their oblation. I have not taken the ass of one of them, nor have I wronged any of them. So Moses is saying, I've been a good leader, I've been an honest leader, pay no regard to what they say. And Moses says to Korach, tomorrow you and all your company appear before Adonai, you, they, and Aaron. You'll take your fire pans, lay incense on them, bringing that fire pan before God, 250 fire pans. And you and Aaron will also bring your fire pans. And they each took a fire pan, put fire on it, laid incense on it, and took a place at the entrance of the meeting. And Korach gathers the whole community there. Then the presence of Adonai appeared to the whole community. God speaks to Moses and Aaron, stand back that I may annihilate them. But they fell on their faces and said, O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one member sins, will you be wrathful to the whole community? And God speaks to Moses and say, speak to the community and say, withdraw from the abodes of Korach, Datan, and Abiram. And he goes up and goes to Datan, Aviram, the elders of Israel, following him, and he says, move away from the tents of these wicked men, touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out. So they withdraw from the abodes there, and Datan and Aviram had come out, and they stood at the entrance to their tents with their wives, their children, their little ones. And Moses says, by this you shall know that it was Adonai who sent me to do these things. They are not of my own devising. If these people's death is that of all humankind, if their death is humankind's common fate, it was not Adonai who sent me. But if Adonai brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them, and all belongs to them, and they go alive to Sheol, the underworld, you shall know that they have spurned God. And so Moses is here predicting an earthquake. And as soon as he finished speaking, the ground bursts asunder, the earth opens its mouth, swallows them. Very limited earthquake, just them, all Korach's people and their possessions, and they go down, and the earth closes over them and vanished. And all Israel fled in their shrieks, and they say, the earth might swallow us. And then a fire comes forth and consumes 250 contestants offering incense. So here Moses really shows himself as a very decisive leader. He takes up this challenge. He involves God's, but even telling God essentially how God should demonstrate what will be. Let me open this up for your thoughts, comments, anything at all about the Great Rebellion? Anybody? Okay, yeah, Barry. I can't hear you, Barry. You're muted.
That was harsh.
Yeah,
That's
it certainly is harsh. On the other hand, what will happen if this isn't brought to a dramatic end? Right? And it's all up for grabs now. And, God is not going to lead, God doesn't work through them. What's going to happen to the people as a result of all this? Yes, it's very harsh, but it's also a very public demonstration that this challenge, and specifically a challenge which speaks about, well, everybody's holy, as if everyone is inherently holy. There are holy people provided they act in a holy way. I think it is worth noting, despite this text, that Korach's sons do seem to survive. We have a psalm of the sons of Korach. For example, there's a rabbinic passage that they wind up studying Torah in Jerusalem. So I think the harshness here, the rabbis, as you are perhaps uncomfortable with the level of harshness, and are looking for ways. Now, how they explain that, I don't really recall. Go ahead, Barry.
so, I'm thinking you have these 250 fire pans, and you have Aaron and Moses with a fire pan, and the 250 fire pans go out, and Moses, but the fires and with Moses and Aaron remained. That would demonstrate that God's choice.
Yes. And then
without,
later on, we get
without annihilating the people.
yes. And later in the Torah, after this incident, they do something different. They have rods, and Aaron's rod. They put them in the Mishkan, and Aaron's and there are rods, I believe, from each tribe, though I'm not positive about that. Anyway, in the morning, Aaron's rod is budding, right? The others are just sticks, right? So it's a different kind of a demonstration, a more positive demonstration that Aaron is really the right one to be the high priest. Other comments, Sandy?
So, am I right that the women and the children were also swallowed in this earthquake? And
Yeah.
how is that viewed for the
Well,
rabbis?
the assumption that it's hard to believe that if the sons survive, the women and the children don't. We have evidence of the survival of this. The women are not going to be studying in Jerusalem because, for the rabbi's point of view, they're not studying. The sons of Korach you don't have women composing psalms either. So I wouldn't read into it that, from their point of view, only the sons survive. How they understand anybody surviving is a different question.
But I mean, is it fair that the children and the women also are killed?
Is it fair? No, it's not. And the Torah in general, I would say, it's a very harsh world, and it is the biblical world. And so when they attack a city and they're told to destroy the city, they're told to destroy everyone, right? Not just the men who are the warriors. The women sometimes are taken as slaves. That's that world. And these texts, I think, reflect that world and not ours. And we wouldn't, it would be abhorrent even to the rabbis, if someone were to put a family to death for the sin of an individual, and in fact, we do have this statement that God does not put children to death for the sins of their parents. Okay, anything else? I want to move on to another text, at least get one more in. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And now we come to the daughters of Tzlofechad. They are, and it's interesting to me that we give them a full biography. They are from a family in the tribe of Manasseh. Their father Tzlofechad was the son of Hefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, son of Manasseh, and ultimately the son of Joseph, who came forward. So why this whole bibliography? One of the commentaries says, well, because it shows that these were all righteous people. Another says, and I like this a lot, why tie it back all the way back to Joseph? Because Joseph had a love for the land of Israel. And in fact, you remember that at the end of the story of Joseph, when he gathers his children and he says, you will be redeemed from here, and don't forget my bones, that he wants to be buried in the land of Israel. And here the daughters of Tzlofechad are themselves asking for land in the land of Israel. And also notably is we get all their names, Machla and Noah and Hagla, Milcah and Tirzah. Generally speaking, we do not get the names of women in the Torah, and here we get them all. Suggests that they are very important people, and as we're going to see, they are extremely important because they will create a new law. I don't know anywhere else. Well, yes, I do know there are several places, 3 places actually, where Moses will do what he does here and ask God about an issue. But in those cases, I'm trying to think. No, I'm not sure, so I won't say. Okay. So they say, our father died in the wilderness. He was not part of Korach's rebellion, which banded together against God. He died for his own sin and left no sons. So they're saying that their father died, but he didn't die in rebellion. The rabbis identify him as a person who gathered sticks for Shabbat, on Shabbat, and Moses, in that case too, goes and asks God what's to be done about him, and he is executed for violating Shabbat. But the assumption is that his death atones for his sin. Nonetheless, they're saying, let not our father's name be lost to his clan because he has no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen. And here, as in a couple of other cases, Moses does not answer. He brings the case to God. And here I think this is also tells us something about Moses as a leader, that there are places where he just doesn't feel he has the right to make decisions. And God says to Moses, the plea of Tzlofechad's daughters is just. The Hebrew here is a little bit stronger. It says, Cain dibrot b'not Tzlofechad. The daughters of Tzlofechad have spoken correctly. And I think in that, we also get a sense of that the form of their plea, not only what they're asking for, but the way they're asking for it is the right way to ask. That they come and they make this claim. They're not criticizing Moses. They're not criticizing Aaron. They're not criticizing God. They're just saying, well, this would, what they're doing is, in a sense, honoring a parent, right? This is kibud av, that our father's name should not be lost. And so God says they're right, and you should give them a hereditary holding among their father's kinsmen, transfer their father's share in the land to them, and speak to the Israelite people as follows. And here we get a generally applicable law. If a householder dies without leaving a son, you'll transfer his property to his daughters. If he has no daughter, you'll assign it to his brothers. If he has no brothers, to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, you assign it to the nearest relative who shall inherit it. This shall be the law of procedures for Israelite in accordance with God's command to Moses. And then we will get this command. After this, God is now telling Moses, it is time for you to go. As God says to Moses, ascend to the height of Avarim and view the land that I've given. When you have seen it, you will be gathered to your people just as your brother Aaron was in the wilderness of Zin, when the people were contentious. So this is what we saw before. You didn't uphold my sanctity. And we get a little different name for it. And Moses then says, source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community who will go before them and go out before them and come in before them, who will take them out and bring them in, so that Adonai's community will not be like sheep that have no shepherd. And God says, okay, single out Joshua. And then here we'll get, I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. Joshua will present himself to Eleazar. This is actually, he's told, single out Joshua, have him stand before Eleazar the priest and before the whole community, commission him in their sight. So Moses' request that the people will have a leader is granted, and now Moses is going to formally transfer authority to him in the presence of everyone. We'll come back to this next time. I don't want to go further with it because there's more in here, and I do want to come back and talk about a little bit about, if people have questions about the daughters of Tzlofechad. So anything about that at all, or anything about anything we've discussed? Saul.
It's interesting that the story about the Benot Tzlofechad, when you had mentioned it, it's elongated, appears again at the end of the last Parsha Maseh, where they're instructed they have to marry within the same tribe, have children within the same tribe. So it's repeated again.
Yes, but as you say, with an important caveat. Right? Their claim is, well, our father's memory shouldn't be lost, right? But that doesn't mean that the land will be transferred to another tribe, right? And that is that is the petition, right? It's a similar circumstance, right? The tribe of Menashe comes to Moses, and their God, in a sense, modifies it. So what do? They do, because they are that intent on keeping their father's name alive, they limit their marital choices to their father's tribe, because the assumption is that it all follows the husband, right? And that's sort of biblical law, that inheritance follows a husband, and therefore their their right to inherit you couldn't have it go to another tribe and therefore have that tribe inherit land within the tribe of Menashe. Would be unreasonable. And so we do get that modification. And yes, and they're mentioned again, and they're mentioned by name. I think underlying again their importance, even though it's being qualified. Anything else? Sandy?
Yeah, I remember one story in the Torah about a man collecting sticks, but I don't remember that they said it in that episode or that story, his name. This is the father.
And no, he is not named, and that's precisely why the rabbis can identify him as the father who died. If we knew his name, they wouldn't be able to do it so easily. He was not important in the way that the daughters of Tzlofechad are important. We have one other situation like this where people who had become impure and therefore couldn't eat from the Passover offering are complaining that they shouldn't be cut off. Right? And there too, Moses goes to God, and God says, "Okay, we'll have a makeup day." Right? A month later, and they'll be able to. They don't have to eat matzah for a week, but they can make the Paschal offerings, and there too, they're anonymous. So it's very striking here, I think. Anything else, Mary?
Yeah, so the fact that the daughters petitioned Moses to inherit the father's wealth, suggests that there was either previously no precedent or was a different precedent.
I'm not sure what you're asking exactly.
I'm just waiting for my phone to stop ringing.
Okay.
Yeah. No. So I'm saying, what before this ruling, what would happen in such a situation?
What would happen is, as we see here, if there are no daughters, what happens, right? It's first of all, sons inherit first, always, right? And then if there are no daughters, then and no sons, then it goes to the brother, and it goes outside into the father's brother, but that doesn't maintain the father's name, and then it goes to other relatives. So that's already in effect. The thing is, though, the daughters themselves can't inherit. And that's the change that's being made. Now, specifically, I don't know that we see anywhere those laws about who inherits. I don't think they're in the Torah, but they're assumed. And this goes to the idea that there must be oral law also, going all the way back to biblical times, not just what is written. Another comment, another interpretation that the rabbis make is that their father was a firstborn, the son of firstborns. And remember that the firstborn gets a double portion. So when they talk about their father's portion, they're actually talking about more land. And yet, and this is only a rabbinic interpretation, text doesn't say it, but that makes it even bigger, if you will.
But
yeah.
Yeah, so it would, in the biblical context of that time, would appear to me to make a difference if the daughters were married or not. So if they were married, then they would have husbands who would provide for them.
Yes.
But if you have an unmarried daughter without any inheritance, then how did she survive?
Yes, absolutely. If they're clearly unmarried. If they were married, then this wouldn't even be a question. It would be about their husband's inheritance and not about theirs and whatever tribes the husbands came from. Yeah. Other thing?
Thank you.
Yeah, Francesca.
Sorry, I had to be off screen most of the class, but I found very comforting your idea that even though to me, it felt that God was very harsh in punishing Moses and not letting him, which was probably his big dream to be able to go there, to go into Israel, that to think about it in terms of as you reconstituted it, that was his role and he completed his role. I like that idea that our work for those of us that are involved in community in whatever form we do, that we feel the importance about contributing in a way that's meaningful for us, that serves others, that the work always goes on. We do what we can, but then there's always more to do. So I found that idea very comforting, and thank you for offering it.
Sure. As you're saying that, I think about my rabbinic career, right? Which is now over.
No, it's not. You're still teaching us.
Let me finish the sentence.
Okay.
In terms of serving a
That's
and I feel like I contributed. I made a difference. And some of them got on in different directions, right? Some of the rabbis who succeeded me have done things I wouldn't have done. But I played my part, right? And they're still going.
Of course.
So,
and it's still valuable what you do.
and so, that has to be enough. If I look back on my career, it has to be enough. If I move the needle, that's good. But that's what it means in some ways to serve God, I think. Last comment.
Me. So, continuing what you just said, Rabbi, in South Brunswick, you established or made it possible that Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are holidays for everybody in the school system, and that was in the 1980s, and now it's still in effect.
Well, thank you for that. I'm glad to hear that. I had forgotten all about it, and I will consider it a win. So I'm really glad to hear that. Okay. Anything else? Have a great week. We will finish with Moses next week, and we will look at Deborah. So that's what's coming. And I look forward to seeing you then, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
too.
for